She directly advocated for ethnostates at 640.
First off, if Black Americans did go to Africa, to a place where there were no white people, this still wouldn't be an ethnostate.
There are white people in Africa.
I should have corrected this point during the debate. An ethnostate is made up of only one ethnicity. I don't say this as a gotcha moment, but to point out that the way that people talk about Africa is as if it's made up of one ethnicity of Black people. This understanding is inaccurate. Africa is the most genetically diverse continent in the world. There are over 2,000 languages. Even if there were a country with only Black Africans, it wouldn't be an ethnostate as it's made up of multiple ethnicities.
So obviously, like, ethnostate etymologically means one ethnicity, but in reality, what people mean is a race state. Like, we talk about white ethnostaters, but it's not like, oh yeah, they only want like German ancestral Americans, not Polish ancestral Americans or Italian ancestral Americans or whatever else. Like, they're not going to kick out all the Swedish, Norwegian, Finnish, French, so on and so forth, because it's exclusively, yeah, only Latvians. No, like, obviously, colloquially, it's used to mean like of a single race. Or, yeah, or you could say like a single national identity group. You could excise some ethnicities, but allow other ones in, depending on their relationship. Like, for example, the Iranian and Turkish hatred of Kurdish people, like the attempts to sort of discriminate against them. It's not as though there are only two ethnicities in Iran, Kurdish and non-Kurdish Iranian, but you could still argue there's an ethnostatey tendency to saying stuff like, you know, Iran's not for Kurds.
Secondly, there are indigenous people who are isolationist, and this is a kind of ethnostate where they truly are a singular ethnicity and visitors aren't allowed. Well, I don't see Black...
If the only examples you can think of an ethnostate are the fucking North Sentinel Island and...
This is a kind of ethnostate where they truly are a singular ethnicity and visitors aren't allowed.
And the island of Niihau with indigenous Hawaiian people, then probably when people say ethnostate, they're not referring to literally like everyone here is related by blood. Like, oh yeah, we have real ethnostates, these uncontacted tribes.
Well, I don't see Black separatists wanting to live in isolation to this extreme. I don't think this would be wrong if it happened. I think Vaush truly...
Oh!
Wanting to live in isolation to this extreme. I don't think this would be wrong if it happened. I think Vaush truly believes that I'm advocating for violent separatism, and I'm simply not. There's a number of ideas I could think of separatism without violence. Buy a plot of land off the grid and build your own community, or move to places in Africa that already have an all-Black or nearly all-Black population.
Okay, you guys realize this is literally the race-swapped version of the black-pilled white nationalist Americans who are like, guys, we're never going to get those brown people out of our country. We need to find some like white community in Finland and just stay there. This is literally the same thing. It's like, listen, I'm not a racist, okay? I understand that I probably couldn't like genocide the 100 million non-white people in America. I simply want to go up and live in some like Russian village where everyone is white. Like, white nationalists say this shit all the time.
There's a number of options where I can see Black separatists.
Oh yeah, also, critical point here. Black Americans and Black Africans, historically and contemporarily, are so not the same that the idea that a Black American could just go to Africa and just be there is fucking ridiculous. Black Americans are American. They're Westerners. Black Americans descend from a lineage that has been in the West, or at least in America, longer than a lot of the white people in America. The idea that they could just go to Africa and have something in common because of their skin tone is insane. It's ridiculous. Let her LARP, Vaush? I will not let her LARP, actually. The funny thing is that a lot of the tendencies that we associate with Black culture here in the United States also, I'm pretty sure, would end up getting treated over in Africa, at least some parts of it, in a fashion similar to like the racist Fox News thug fear-mongering that we hear about. I've heard stories about like cultural, like conservative opposition in some African countries. And again, I'm being kind of general here because I'm not like an expert on like Africa as a continent or any of its individual countries, but like they are more socially conservative than ours are by a huge margin. So the like, I haven't like, dog, can you imagine a bunch of Black Americans moving over to Africa and then immediately getting treated like worse than Black Americans do here in America because now they've compounded like cultural differences on top of like existing like traveling and just the general difficulty of integrating to a new culture? Holy shit. We don't want another Liberia situation. All right, whatever. Also, I hope everyone understands the only reason that we keep talking about Professor Flowers is because everybody else keeps bringing her up. My talk with her was the most unambiguous, objective L she could have possibly taken, and lefties will still, like, break every bone in their bodies so they can contort into the tiniest boxes to defend her further. Like, the convo happened literally, like, almost 3 years ago, and people are still constantly bringing her up as some evidence of, like, the mistreatment of my community, the mistreatment which just is never substantiated, I guess. After some pretty heinous political positions fronted by her. But, like, they just keep bringing her up. The debate was September 2021, I think. Okay, so not 3 years then. I guess a year and a half? Here's her word for word defending genocide.
Entertaining. What exactly is genocide? During the debate, I was genuinely unsure if removing colonizers is genocide. What I understood about genocide is that it can
Remember that she literally defines colonizers as white people. So what she's saying right now is, I don't know if removing 6 million people by state force would count as genocide. The answer to that is kind of ambiguous depending on the definition of genocide you use. It does meet the definition of ethnic cleansing. By my definition, it absolutely meets, like, genocide. Like, if like Ron DeSantis took power and he was like, okay, yeah, we're literally just going to deport all black people, I think that calling that genocidal violence would be completely okay. I don't think anyone would, like, race forward with their finger up, you know, outstretched going, technically, actually, it's not genocide. It's actually, just ethnic cleansing.
be tricky to determine. Much of my understanding of it came from the Rohingya genocide, where their oppression wasn't considered genocide by the UN until 2017. So is removing colonizers genocide? I really wasn't sure. I should have just said—
Well, if by colonizers you mean all white people, then yes. If by colonizers you mean the actual people who were in charge of or directly contributed to colonial power structures, then that can be fine, depending on how it's done.
I'm not sure what the definitions of genocide are, pause to look it up, and discussed it from there, instead of me responding with, I'm not sure, or I think that's okay, as any sense of uncertainty was seen as evidence of me being pro-genocide, and someone who was all too close to white nationalism but naively couldn't see it. So after the debate, I looked up if violent decolonization is considered genocide. I didn't find a clear answer on that, but what I did find on the legal definition was this. Genocide is A, killing members of the group, B, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group.
I would say forced deportation of millions of people would count as serious bodily or mental harm, in my opinion.
C, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. D,
I think that also counts.
E, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. E, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group.
Kind of like abstractly, because you're forcing the children of that group onto another country, out of your borders.
For the legal definition, the intent is a deciding factor, and there must be a proven intent on the part of perpetrators to physically destroy a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. Cultural destruction does not suffice, nor does an intention to simply disperse a group. Also, the victims of genocide must be deliberately targeted, not randomly, because of their real or perceived membership of one of the 4 groups protested under the convention, which again are national, ethnic, racial, and religious groups. After reading this, something that struck me as really frustrating was that the gotcha moment where my views were compared to genocide didn't constitute as a legal definition of genocide.
Can you imagine? Like, does it not feel like we're just watching a right-winger here? Like, literally, I feel like I'm back in 2019 and I'm arguing with some far-right guy, and he's like, technically that's not actually genocide. And then, like, looking at, yeah, like, it's in every way.